Hello, my name is Stu. I noticed your job on Upwork, and I right off the bat saw a few issues with your JavaScript code. So I'm going to take you through my process, and hopefully I can teach you a few things, and I'll take each of these problems one at a time. So firstly, let's look at your first problem. I'm going to copy that, and what I like to do is I like to use this tool. It's called Dirty Markup. You can, if you do a Google search for it, for Dirty Markup, you'll find this tool. And what it does is it just cleans up your code a little bit, makes it a little bit easier to read. So I'm going to copy that in there and clean it up. There we go. So I'm going to copy that guy. I've already kind of created. I like to use CodePen. It's just you can quickly put HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in and see your result here in the bottom. So just to make this video a little bit faster, I've already set up a couple of them. But what I'll do is I'll just take you through the process, just so you can see how it works. So I've already signed into CodePen, and I'm just going to create a new pen. I don't really plan on making this very pretty, so I'm just going to close up the CSS. I don't really want to put any styling. So let's look at your first problem. There it is, and I've already got some HTML. So firstly, really the solution to your problem comes down to what kind of inputs you're using. So I'm going to copy this. If I put that in there as my HTML, I'm trying to make this a little bit easier to read. JS over a little bit. There we go. All right. So, firstly, let's talk about use strict. This use strict statement generally, or actually, this always needs to go at just the top of your file, of every JavaScript file. And essentially, how it works is whenever a program is interpreting your JavaScript, like the browser. In most cases, it will see this statement and say, okay, you want to run this JavaScript file in strict mode, and doing so, it will throw more errors depending on a bunch of scenarios. If you look up strict mode on Google search, you'll see here the first. It just introduces better error checking in your JavaScript. It makes your JavaScript more efficient, and in general, it just throws more errors than if you didn't use strict mode. So, just want to place that once at the top of each file. You can put as many functions as you want afterwards, it will run strict mode for the entire file. So. That's your first slight little issue there. Secondly, it depends on the type of inputs here. So I've got 3 input types. These are number inputs. I have one that's a text input. So if we run this, let's just run this and get the result. First, we need to run our first problem. Let's see what our console is saying. Okay, so first number, second. All right. So, firstly, I've got a little bit of a change here. So my button is. So I've already added. So what I need to do is I actually need to get. So I've set it up slightly different. So document.getElementID result. So I'm just putting my result in just a div tag here. .inner HTML. So let's run this now. So there's your result. So this works. I think possibly because you had to use strict inside here, probably didn't like it. Let's see if that works. No, it seems to work okay. So that really works all right there. I think maybe what you were doing is not having the correct inputs. And to show you an example of that, firstly, I'll just save this. Call it 1. Is possibly, this is kind of a scenario I brought up, I thought about earlier, is if I go to some more of my pens, I've got one where you have different element values. Let's pull this one up really quickly. So here, if you say, for example, if you're using divs, right, and I'll just run this and I have the same code here, right, and I get the result, what you need to do is you need to make sure that you sanitize your inputs, and you need to put this parseInt, because if you get the value, so if in this case we're using a div, it's not .value, like it as in inputs, it's inner text. This will give you a string, and a string looks like this, right? And the problem with this is when you put this string into your equation as these values, right? It will not be happy with this, because it doesn't know how to interpret. You don't know how to do math on strings. You need to make this converted to an actual value, an actual number, 10. These are different types in JavaScript, where this is of type string, whereas this is of type number. And when you're doing math, this will throw an error because it's called an NaN, not a number, because it's detecting a string. So to get rid of that problem, to convert strings to integers, there's kind of a built-in function in JavaScript that comes with the JavaScript engine. It's called parseInt. It just exists, and what that will do is you'll see when we run this and we see we're logging out our A, B, and C values. You see that we're getting actual numbers here, 10, 20, 40. And if we didn't do a parseInt, right, and we run this, that might be throwing an error. You can see, so firstly, let me clear this just to be clear. When we run this, you see that this is not gonna be happy with this, and somehow it's actually done it correctly. But so what this equation done is it has kind of already interpreted the string, but just to make it clean, you want to run these parseInts so that you're getting actual numbers, because you'll run into problems later. So that's the first solution, and it looks like that's all working correctly. So it really depends on, you can use just divs as inputs and just get the inner text, which gives you just the actual string value, or you can go and actually use inputs that you can change different values to get it to work. There you go. So your code was close here. Just to use strict needs to always just go on the top of the file on the outside, and I would suggest if you're using inputs, I would always suggest just to be sure to use a parseInt around your values. And there's also security reasons as well. Anytime you have inputs, you want to make sure that here, since it's a number, you can't type text. It has to be a number, so it's pretty, nobody can inject anything into this input. So it's also fairly secure to do it this way with the input type is equal to number. And you can change your numbers as you wish. And there we go. So that's the first problem solved. Code looks pretty clean. The second problem is, I'm going to go over to my Visual Studio Code. Got your second problem. I haven't really done much with this, but I'm going to go back to my dirty markup, do the same process. Clean that up a little bit. There we go. stick it. I'm going to go and create a new pen. So what I'll do is I'll just save that and go back to this. New pen. So same as before. Always want to have this just at the top of the file, which now this whole file will be interpreted as in strict mode. Before, I mean, you could have your other functions that you had before, so you have your function first problem here, return, it's going to return 0, so really, because we're focusing on the second problem. So if we look at the second problem, same thing again. You want to make sure, it really depends on this document.getElement by ID gen 1, you know, what type of element is it? And I would always suggest using inputs. So I'm just going to copy this over again for this problem. And so now since you've changed your ID values, so let's just copy these in. How many do you have? You got 6. Gen 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. I put that text just to see if it also worked, which it does, but let's just put number, because it looks like you just want numbers with different values. Change this to 1.63, 0, and 10. And then we want to call on click. We've assigned a click handler here on this button. So we're going to call our second problem, which is going to get the result, and we're going to put our value in this result div, which should appear below. So firstly, looking at this, anything, when you return a value, anything after a return statement within a function is not going to execute. So this code is irrelevant because it will never be interpreted. So you actually want to put this on the outside. So let's do that. And really, you've got WAT1 here. Just to, let's call it WAT1 then. Inner HTML is equal to second problem. Now, I'm not really sure. I think what you want to do is actually you want to execute the second problem, because if you're just referencing second problem like that, you're just referencing the actual function. So you can actually see second problem dot toString, right? We'll actually put the function as a string into that element, as you can see here, right? Which is just stringified, just taken this function and just stringified it. I think what you're actually trying to do is you actually want to run the second problem, right? Which there, you can see there's your result, 101.63, which has added all of these together, essentially. 6020, yep, it's correct, get result. So let's just check that. So secondly, since this is outside of the scope, it's not really, it only executes once. And what we wanted to actually execute, we wanted to get the result of this every time we click get result, which I think is what you're trying to achieve. So what you can actually do is just call this, create a new function called get result. Right. So a function. And then do this, which will run it into a different function. Right? So when we click this button, it's going to call this function, which will then get this guy and execute your equation here, your second problem, which will add all the inputs together. So that should work. Get result. Just make sure this pen is saved. Right, so if I change this to 7, so now you've got a fully running program here which will adapt since you've created that extra function, and it's running in strict mode. It won't, and we could, if we wanted to just be complete, we could add both the first problem and the second problem in, which I don't think would be a problem. So let's just add this guy in to be complete. So, and we need our markup. Right. What we'll do is we'll put just a BR tag in there. Should just give us a separator. And since we have here, we've got WAT1 and result, shouldn't be a problem. First button, button 1, let's just call this button 2. And update our second function for, it doesn't really matter because this is calling get result, this is calling first problem, and it should all work. So get result, which is the result of that. And actually you really shouldn't use elements as inputs, you should use these. So let's, meant to really copy this. So let's put that there, that's a bit better. We've updated, so we've got our result. So we're back to our initial problem. Since we changed inputs from it being div tags to input tags, it is value like you initially had, not inner text like you would get from a div. And so there's our result for that one, and there's our result for that one. And both you can update. Let's increase these values, say, should be a different result. And for this one, let's add negative 1.567, get result, there we go. So now you've got your clean JavaScript code. Both problems are solved. Here we're returning the result of this, and we added anything after a return statement is not going to execute. So what we did is we put it in a different function, and we're calling that function from our button. And there you go. You've got your clean code, no errors in the console. Console's just logging our stuff. Let's clear that up. Run it one more time. Looks good. And we're getting our results in. Problem solved. So I think that's it for you. Hope you've learned a bit. Hope I've solved your problems. And yeah, if you want to speak to me on messages, that's cool. Anytime. I'm available anytime. I've got the app on my phone, so it should give me an update or an alert. And again, my name is Stu, and it's been a pleasure. And talk to you later.